I'm Leo, I'm 32, and I was told by my own mother that I wasn't family. Before I tell you about the absolute firestorm that followed, the lawyers, the threats, and the moment of truth that changed everything, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always incredible to see how far these stories can reach. The front door of my childhood home felt smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I was just bigger, filled with a fragile hope that made me feel like a giant. It was a cold December night, the kind where your breath plumes in front of you like a ghost. My hands were numb from carrying a dozen ridiculously expensive gifts from my car. A designer watch for my dad, a first edition novel for my mom, a new gaming console for my younger brother, Ethan. I'd driven 8 hours straight, fueled by gas station coffee and the naive belief that this year would be different. This year, they'd see me. Through the frosted glass panel of the door, I could see the warm, buttery glow of the living room. I saw silhouettes moving, heard the murmur of laughter and clinking glasses. Party. My heart gave a little leap. A surprise welcome home party? The thought was so foreign, so out of character for them, that I almost laughed at my own foolishness. Still, I knocked, a cheerful rhythm against the solid oak. The door creaked open, and there she was, my mother, Eleanor. She's a small woman, barely 5'3", but she has a way of looking down on you that can make you feel like an insect. Her smile, which was bright for whoever was inside, froze on her face when she saw me. It didn't just disappear. It was erased, replaced by a flat, hard line. "Leo," she said, not a question but an accusation. "Hi, Mom," I managed, hoisting the bags of gifts. "Merry Christmas." She didn't even look at the presents. Her eyes, the same shade of blue as mine, were like ice chips. "What are you doing here?" The cold from the night air seemed to seep right into my bones. I came home. For the holidays." She glanced over her shoulder, back into the warmth and laughter of the party. Then she looked back at me, her expression unyielding. And then came the words that would change everything. The words that severed a cord I never even knew was fraying. "You weren't invited," she said, her voice low and steady. "This is for family only." For a second, the world went silent. The laughter inside, the distant traffic, the rustling of the wind in the bare trees. It all vanished. There was only her face, her words hanging in the air between us like a guillotine. I looked past her and I saw them all. My dad, Richard, looking uncomfortable. My aunts and uncles. And my brother, Ethan, raising a glass with a woman I didn't recognize, a diamond sparkling on her finger. I didn't say a word. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. A strange, cold clarity washed over me. I simply turned around, walked back down the path, and got into my car. As I pulled away from the curb, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Ethan. "Don't take it personally. You know how you are." I stared at the screen, and for the first time in years I didn't feel hurt. I didn't feel sad. I felt nothing at all. And then, a slow, cold smile spread across my face. I pulled over, opened my banking app, and began to dismantle the life I had built for them. The life they took for granted. I didn't know it then, but this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. To understand that night, you have to understand my family's two fundamental laws. Law number 1, Ethan was the golden child. Law number 2, I was the provider. It had been that way for as long as I could remember. Our childhood in suburban Ohio was a masterclass in this dynamic. On the surface, it was perfect. Manicured lawn, 2-car garage, the smell of Mom's baking on a Sunday. But inside those walls, every day was a lesson in my own expendability. I remember when I was 10 and Ethan was 7. For his birthday, he got a brand new Schwinn bicycle. It was fire engine red, with chrome fenders and a loud bell. He'd ride it up and down the street, beaming, while my parents watched from the porch, their faces shining with pride. I was happy for him, I really was, but my own bike was a rusty hand-me-down with a wobbly wheel. When I'd asked for a new one, my mom had sighed, a long theatrical sound. "Leo, honey, we just don't have the money. You understand, don't you? You're the responsible one." I was always the responsible one. That same year, I won the district-wide science fair. I'd spent months on my project, a detailed model of a volcanic eruption. I got a blue ribbon and a small trophy. I ran home, bursting with pride, clutching the trophy like it was the Olympic gold. I found my parents in the living room. I won. I won first place, I announced. My dad grunted from behind his newspaper. My mom looked up from her magazine. "Oh, that's nice, dear," she said, her eyes already drifting back to the page. "Put it on the shelf." There was no celebration, no special dinner. An hour later, Ethan came home with a crudely made macaroni necklace from art class. My mother gasped, scooped him up in a hug, and immediately cleared a space on the mantelpiece to display it. "Oh, Ethan, it's beautiful. You're such an artist." The trophy I'd won was eventually moved to my bedroom to make more space for Ethan's finger paintings. The message was clear. My achievements were nice, but his efforts were treasures. At 16, while other kids were at football games, I was working 40-hour weeks at a greasy diner, the smell of fries clinging to my clothes. Every Friday, I'd come home, my body aching, and hand over most of my paycheck to my dad. He'd take it without meeting my eyes, murmuring something about the mortgage or the utilities. "This will help," was all he'd say. There was never a thank you. It wasn't a gift. It was an expectation. It was my duty. Ethan, meanwhile, had a different duty: to be charming, to get good enough grades to stay on the baseball team, to make my mother laugh. He was good at it. He could walk into a room and light it up, while I felt like I was always lurking in the shadows, counting receipts and worrying about bills that weren't even mine. The difference was never clearer than at dinner time. If Ethan got a B on a test, my mother would say, "Oh, sweetie, you tried your best. That's all that matters." If I got an A-, she'd ask, "What happened to the other 4 points, Leo?" Her words were never loud or angry. They were worse. They were quiet, disappointed little cuts that bled for days. "It's just we expect more from you," she'd say, placing a smaller portion of dessert on my plate. "You're the one with the head for these things. Your brother is more of a people person." My dad, Richard, was a silent accomplice. He was a tall man, stooped by a lifetime of avoiding conflict. He saw what was happening. I know he did. I catch him looking at me sometimes with a flicker of something: guilt, maybe, pity, but he never stepped in. He never defended me. When Eleanor's quiet critique started, he'd just become intensely interested in the food on his plate. His silence was louder than her words. Told me I was alone. Confirmed that this was my role, my box, and I was expected to stay in it. He enabled her, and in doing so, he failed me just as much. The family narrative was set in stone. Ethan was the heart, and I was the wallet. He was the one to be proud of, to show off at family gatherings. I was the one who paid for the new tires on the car that got him there. I spent my entire youth thinking that if I just worked harder, gave more, and asked for less, one day they would turn to me and say, "Thank you, Leo. We see you. We love you." It was a fool's errand. I was pouring water into a bucket with a hole in the bottom, and I was the only one who couldn't see it. They weren't a family raising 2 sons. They were a company with 1 prized asset and 1 workhorse. My escape route came in the form of a thick envelope from the Wharton School of Business. It wasn't a full ride, but it was a scholarship, a ticket out. I'd studied relentlessly, locking myself in my room while the sounds of Ethan and his friends echoed from the yard. The library was my sanctuary. Books didn't judge. Numbers didn't have favorites. They were logical, and for every problem there was a solution. When I showed my parents the acceptance letter, my dad clapped me on the back, a rare show of affection. "Well done, son," he said, his voice thick. But my mother, she held the letter like it was a bill she couldn't pay. "Philadelphia?" she said, the name of the city sounding like an insult on her tongue. "That's so far away. It feels selfish, Leo, leaving us like this." "Mom, it's Wharton," I said, my voice pleading. "It's the best business school in the country. This is the whole point of me working so hard." "The point was to help the family," she corrected gently, her eyes full of practiced disappointment. Who's going to help with the bills when you're gone? Your father's salary isn't what it used to be. It was a checkmate. She'd framed my ambition as abandonment. But for the first time in my life, I didn't back down. I went. But the guilt she'd instilled in me went with me, packed in my suitcase alongside my worn-out clothes. College was a different world. It was hard, challenging, and for the first time I was being judged on my own merit. I got a part-time job at the university's financial aid office, and even with my scholarship and student loans, money was tight. But every month, without fail, I wired a portion of my meager earnings home. $300, sometimes $400. It meant I ate ramen noodles more often than I'd like to admit. It meant I said no to ski trips with friends. It meant I wore the same pair of jeans until they were threadbare. My roommate, a guy named Tasha, couldn't understand it. He came from a loud, loving Italian family where everyone supported each other. He watched me one night, hunched over my laptop, calculating how much I could send home after paying for my textbooks. "Dude, why?" he asked, genuinely baffled. "My parents send me money. That's how it's supposed to work. Are they in some kind of trouble?" "It's complicated," I mumbled, feeling a hot flush of shame. How could I explain that I was still trying to buy their approval? That I was paying a monthly subscription for their love? How could I explain the gnawing fear that if I stopped paying, I'd cease to exist in their world? I was terrified she was right, that leaving was selfish, that I had abandoned them, and the money was my penance. I remember one call in particular. It was the week before finals. I was exhausted, stressed, and running on fumes. My mom called, her voice frantic. The water heater had broken. It was going to cost $1,000 to replace. She didn't ask if I had it. She just stated the problem, the unspoken solution hanging in the air. "I just don't know where we'll get that kind of money, Leo. We might have to go without hot water for a while." I looked at my bank account. I had just over $1,200 to my name, meant to last me the rest of the semester. A group of my friends were planning a small road trip after finals to celebrate, something I was desperate to go on. It was a choice. A week of freedom and fun with friends, or my family's comfort. I sent them the $1,000. That weekend, while my friends were sending pictures from the beach, I was in the library, trying to study. Tasha found me there, staring blankly at a textbook I hadn't been able to read for an hour. He put a slice of pizza in front of me. "From my dad's care package," he said quietly. "Eat up, man. You look like a ghost." I ate the pizza, and I felt a wave of gratitude so intense it almost brought me to tears. It was a simple act of kindness with no strings attached. It was something I had never experienced from my own family, and it planted a tiny, dangerous seed of doubt in my mind. Maybe Tasha's world wasn't the strange one. Maybe mine was. Graduation should have been my liberation day. I had a degree from Wharton and a job offer at a prestigious consulting firm in Boston with a fantastic starting salary. I'd made it. I was financially independent. The chains, I thought, were finally broken. But I was wrong. The chains had just gotten longer, gilded with my success. The calls didn't stop. They just got more expensive. It started with Ethan's college fund. Or rather, the lack of one. My parents had never saved a penny for his education. It was just assumed that I would handle it. "You're doing so well now, Leo," my mother would say, her voice syrupy sweet over the phone. "It would be such a shame for Ethan not to have the same opportunities you had." The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. So I paid. I set up a direct payment to his state university, covering his tuition semester after semester. Then it was the house. The roof was leaking. The furnace was on its last legs. The car needed a new transmission. Each problem was presented as a 5-alarm fire, a catastrophe that only I could solve. I became the family's unofficial bank, the 24/7 emergency hotline. But banks charge interest. They get paid back. I just got the next bill. I never got a simple thank you. Instead, I got critiques. We had to pay a little extra for the premium shingles. The contractor said they were better. My mom would say, explaining why the roof cost more than the estimate. Or from Ethan, "Hey bro, the meal plan here sucks." Any chance you could spot me some extra for groceries? My money was their money. My success was their resource to be tapped at will. My life in Boston felt like a world away. I had friends, a nice apartment, a career I was proud of. I was good at my job. I could look at a company's financials and see the rot, the inefficiencies, the bad investments. Yet I was blind to the toxic balance sheet of my own family. My best friend in Boston, a sharp-witted colleague named Chloe, saw it clearly. She was the first person I told the whole story to, one evening over drinks after a particularly draining call from my mother. "Let me get this straight," Chloe said, setting down her wine glass. "Your mom called, complained for 10 minutes about how tired she is, and then casually mentioned that she and your dad would love to go on a wellness retreat to Florida that costs $3,000? She said they were stressed," I defended weakly. "That the doctor recommended some sun." "The doctor or a travel brochure?" Chloe shot back, her eyes sharp. "Leo, that's not a family. That's a pyramid scheme, and you're at the bottom holding everyone else up. When was the last time they did anything for you? When was the last time they even asked about your life? Not your wallet." Her question hit me like a physical blow. I scrolled through months of text messages on my phone. They were all requests. "Can you? We need Ethan's car." Not once did they say, "How are you? How's work? Are you happy?" I tried to set boundaries once. I suggested that Ethan get a part-time job to help with his expenses. The fallout was immediate. My mother called me, crying. "How could you be so cruel to your brother? He's trying to focus on his studies. You've changed, Leo. This big city and all this money. It's made you hard." The guilt was a physical thing, a heavy weight in my chest. She was a master at wielding it. Caved. I always caved. I sent the extra money and apologized. The message was clear. My role was to provide, not to question. So I kept providing. I paid for their comfort, their needs, their wants. I was funding a life I wasn't even a part of, hoping that one day, my investment would pay off in the one currency I craved. Love. It was the worst investment I ever made. The returns were always negative. The decision to go home for Christmas was a sudden one, born out of a profound sense of loneliness. My long-term girlfriend, Sarah, and I had broken up in September. It was the culmination of years of the same argument. "I feel like I'm not in a relationship with you, Leo," she'd said during our last fight, her voice weary. "I'm in a relationship with you and your family's endless list of needs. There's no room for me. I can't build a future with a man who is already financially married to his parents and brother. It's like a divorce before we even get started." She was right. I hadn't known how to choose her, how to choose us, over the ingrained sense of duty. The breakup left a void. Then, my friend Chloe, my rock in Boston, moved to Seattle for a fantastic job opportunity. My apartment, once a symbol of my success, suddenly felt cavernous and empty. Thanksgiving was a quiet affair, a potluck with a few colleagues who also had nowhere to go. It was nice, but it wasn't family. As December rolled in, the city lit up with holiday cheer, and every sparkling decoration felt like a spotlight on my isolation. I found myself scrolling through old family photos, back when the smiles weren't so forced, back when I still believed in the fairy tale. A dangerous nostalgia took hold. Maybe Chloe was wrong. Maybe Sarah had been too harsh. Maybe I was the one who was hard. Maybe I was the one who wasn't trying enough. All they needed was a gesture, a grand, undeniable expression of my love. That's when the call came. It was my mother, her voice tight with panic. "Leo, it's a disaster. A pipe burst under the kitchen sink. There's water everywhere. The plumber said the whole floor is probably ruined. We have to replace the subfloor. It's going to cost thousands. I don't know what we're going to do." My heart went out to her. All my resentment vanished, replaced by the familiar tug of responsibility. "It's okay, Mom," I said instantly. "How much do you need?" "The estimate is around $5,000, she said. Her voice choked with a sob that sounded just a little too perfect. "I hate to ask, Leo. I really do, especially right before Christmas. It's just, with everything being so tight, we don't have a college fund for emergencies, you know? The casual mention of a college fund, something I was already paying for on behalf of Ethan, was a masterful touch of manipulation I didn't even register at the time. Don't be silly. It's an emergency, I said, already logging into my bank account. I'll transfer it right now. Don't worry about it. We'll get it fixed. Oh, thank you, baby, she breathed, the relief in her voice palpable. You're a lifesaver. You've always been our lifesaver. The words were like a drug. For a moment I was the hero, the good son. After I sent the money, an idea sparked in my mind. This was my chance. I would go home. I wouldn't tell them I was coming. I'd just show up on their doorstep, laden with gifts, a Christmas surprise. I'd be the prodigal son returning, not in disgrace, but in triumph. They'd see the presents, they'd see my face, and they'd remember that I was their son, not just their benefactor. We'd fix the kitchen floor together. We'd be a family. The idea consumed me. I booked the time off work. I went on a shopping spree, pouring my desperate hope into every purchase. I even called my old childhood friend, Mark. We hadn't been as close since I moved, but I still considered him a friend, a link to my past. Mark, it's Leo. I'm thinking of doing something crazy, I said, excitement making my voice boyish. I'm going to surprise the family for Christmas. No way, man. That's awesome, he said, his voice brimming with enthusiasm. They'll be thrilled. Ethan was just telling me they were planning a quiet one this year, especially after the whole kitchen flood thing. Said they had to cancel a small get-together they were planning. A surprise from you will be perfect. His words cemented my plan. They had canceled a party because of the flood. My arrival would be the perfect pick-me-up. Yeah, that's what I'm hoping, I said, my heart swelling. Don't say anything to Ethan, though. I want it to be a complete surprise. My lips are sealed, he promised. Drive safe, buddy. It'll be great to have you back. I hung up, feeling more optimistic than I had in years. The kitchen flood, the quiet Christmas. It all fit. My surprise visit would be the perfect antidote to a difficult time. I packed my car, the expensive gifts nestled carefully in the back seat. I pictured their faces, the shock turning into delight. I pictured the hugs, the warmth, the feeling of belonging. The 8-hour drive ahead of me felt like nothing. I was flying. I was finally going home. I was so caught up in the fantasy I'd built that I never stopped to ask myself one simple question. What if the foundation it was built on was a lie? The drive was a blur of highway hypnosis and Christmas carols on the radio. With every mile, the fantasy in my head grew more vivid, more detailed. I saw my mom's eyes filling with happy tears. I saw my dad putting a hand on my shoulder, his quiet pride finally spoken aloud. I even saw Ethan, for once, looking at me with something other than casual entitlement. It was a movie I was directing in my own mind, and I was sure of the happy ending. As I turned onto my old street, a sense of childlike excitement washed over me. The houses were draped in festive lights, each one a little beacon of warmth and family. Then I saw my house, and my heart skipped a beat. It wasn't dark and quiet. It was ablaze with light. Every window glowed, and there were cars lining the street, cars I didn't recognize and several I did. My Aunt Carol's minivan, my Uncle Jim's truck. My first thought was, they fixed the kitchen and they're celebrating. A wave of relief. The money had worked. I had saved the day just like always. I parked down the street, my hands suddenly slick with sweat as I gathered the heavy bags of gifts. The cold night air bit at my face, a stark contrast to the warmth I was anticipating. As I walked up the familiar concrete path, the sound hit me. It wasn't the sound of a small, quiet family gathering. It was the sound of a party. A full-blown, joyous, raucous party. Laughter, deep belly laughs, spilled out into the night. I could hear music, the clinking of glasses. My steps slowed. A knot of confusion tightened in my stomach. This wasn't the canceled get-together Mark had mentioned. This was something else entirely. I reached the front door and hesitated. Instead of knocking, I sidled over to the large picture window in the living room. Peering through the gap in the curtains, I saw a scene from a stranger's life. The room was packed. My entire extended family was there. Aunts, uncles, cousins. My mother was wearing a new, elegant-looking dress, the same one I'd seen on my credit card statement a week ago, listed under boutique. She was laughing, holding a glass of champagne, and standing in the center of it all next to her was Ethan. His arm was around a pretty, dark-haired woman. She was holding up her left hand, and a diamond ring caught the light, sending a shard of brilliance across the room. People were cheering, raising their glasses. It wasn't a celebration for a new kitchen floor. It was an engagement party. The $5,000. The burst pipe. The quiet Christmas. The canceled party. It was all a lie. An elaborate, multi-layered deception to fund a party I wasn't meant to be at. The air rushed out of my lungs. The bags of gifts suddenly felt impossibly heavy, filled not with love, but with my own stupidity. My mind reeled, trying to make sense of the betrayal. They had lied. They had taken my help, my money, given under the pretense of an emergency, and used it to throw a party for the golden child. A party they specifically did not want me at. Why? The question hammered in my brain. Why lie? Why not just ask? Why exclude me? Was my presence so undesirable that they had to invent a natural disaster to keep me away while still getting my money? I felt dizzy, disoriented. I stumbled back to the front door, my fantasy shattering into a million sharp, painful pieces. I had to be wrong. There had to be an explanation. Maybe the pipe did burst, and this was a last-minute decision. Maybe they were going to call me tomorrow and tell me the good news. Maybe. The desperate hope of a lifetime dies hard. I raised my hand, my knuckles white, and knocked. The music quieted slightly. The door opened, and my mother stood there, her face a mask of frozen shock. And as I looked into her cold, unwelcoming eyes, I knew. There was no explanation. There was no misunderstanding. There was only the brutal, simple truth she delivered without a hint of remorse. You weren't invited. This is for family only. The words hit me, but this time, the context behind them made them 1,000 times more devastating. I wasn't just being turned away. I was being told that my only value was as a source of funding for a family I was no longer considered a part of. The lie wasn't just about the money. The lie was my entire role in their lives. I wasn't a son. I was a donor, an anonymous, invisible donor. And that's when the hurt finally, blessedly, died. And something new, something cold and hard and clear, rose up to take its place. Resolve. The drive away from my childhood home was strangely calm. There were no tears. There was no shouting at the windshield. The emotional part of my brain seemed to have shut down, handing over control to the logical, methodical consultant I was from 9 to 5. The part of me that analyzed broken systems and implemented efficient, sometimes ruthless, solutions. And my family was the most broken system I'd ever encountered. I found a Holiday Inn Express just off the highway. The room was beige, anonymous, and perfect. It was a sterile environment, free of memories or emotion. I dropped the bags of gifts by the door without a glance. They were artifacts from a different life, a life that had ended about an hour ago. I sat on the edge of the stiff bed, pulled out my laptop, and got to work. My personal finances were my specialty, after all. It was time to conduct a thorough and hostile audit of Mitchell Family Inc. First, the joint savings account I shared with my mother. It was supposed to be an emergency fund for the house. I'd set it up years ago, a safety net for them that I alone contributed to. I logged in. The balance was $12,347.82. As my mouse hovered over the transfer button, I remembered her words when we opened it. This will give us such peace of mind, Leo, knowing we have something to fall back on because of you. It was never our peace of mind. It was us and you. I clicked the button, selected my personal checking account, and entered the full amount. A confirmation screen popped up. Are you sure? I clicked yes without a moment's hesitation. The balance immediately dropped to 0. Asset neutralized. Next, the monthly utility payments. I had them on autopay from my credit card for years. a gesture of convenience for my parents. The electric, the gas, the water, the internet. A total of $327 a month. I went through each provider's website, my fingers flying across the keyboard. As I canceled the internet payment, I thought about Ethan complaining that the speed wasn't fast enough for his gaming. Cancel autopay. Remove payment method. Done. 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 Liabilities severed. Then came the credit cards. My mother and Ethan were both authorized users on one of my high-limit cards. For emergencies. Of course, I logged into my account. The current balance was $4,200. Ethan's spending was easy to spot. Video games, takeout, a new sound system he'd bragged about on social media. My mother's was mostly groceries and gas, but also the recent $400 charge from the dress boutique. The dress she was wearing to deny me entry to my own home. I didn't just freeze the cards. I reported them as stolen. It was a more immediate and irreversible action. Within minutes, their plastic lifelines would be declined. Access denied. The car insurance. I paid for my dad's policy and Ethan's. Another $189 a month. I found the policy number in my email and called the 24-hour customer service line. I explained that I would no longer be responsible for the policy covering their two vehicles. There would be a lapse in coverage effective immediately unless a new payment method was provided. The agent was polite and efficient. Another cord cut. Finally, a small, petty, but deeply satisfying act. The family shared a suite of streaming services, Netflix, HBO, the works, all under my account. I logged in, went to settings, and clicked sign out of all devices. Then I changed the password to something long and unguessable. It was a small thing, but it was symbolic. The entertainment I funded was over. As I worked, my phone started to buzz. A call from my mother. I ignored it. It went to voicemail. It buzzed again. Ethan. Ignored. Then a text message from an unknown number. I opened it. Hey, it's Mark. Just heard you were in town. Ethan said you guys had a weird moment at the door. Hope everything's cool. A cold fury, the first real emotion I'd felt all night, washed over me. Mark, the one person I had confided in. My childhood friend who had promised to keep my secret. He'd run straight to Ethan. He was part of it. He was a snake. His text message wasn't a peace offering. It was reconnaissance. They had sent him to gauge my reaction, to see if the ATM was still functioning after being insulted. I typed back a simple reply. Everything is perfectly cool. Then I blocked his number. By the time I was finished, it was almost 2 a.m. I had systematically dismantled the financial infrastructure that had propped up my family for the last decade. The silence in the beige hotel room was absolute. I leaned back against the headboard, my laptop warm on my lap. I felt light. The weight of their expectations, the constant gnawing guilt, the desperate need for their approval, it was gone. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Mom. Leo, what the hell? The cards aren't working. Call me immediately. The fury in her words was palpable. Not concern, not confusion. Just rage that her access had been cut. I read the one from Ethan that came a second later. Hey, whatever point you're trying to make, you've made it. Turn everything back on. You're ruining my engagement night. My engagement night. The entitlement was breathtaking. I smiled, a real, genuine smile. I turned my phone off, placed it on the nightstand, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, I slept without dreaming. The storm was coming, but for now, I was in the eye of it, calm and completely in control. The next morning, I woke up to a battlefield. I turned my phone on, and it exploded. 37 missed calls, 24 voicemails, 49 text messages. It was a digital siege. The family group chat was a wildfire of panic and accusation, with my name at the center of it all. I scrolled through the messages with a detached curiosity. They weren't apologetic. They were furious. They weren't asking what was wrong. They were demanding I fix what I had broken. The voicemails were even better. My mother's voice, escalating from angry to hysterical. Ethan's, dripping with arrogant disbelief that I would dare to do this. And my father's, the same old tired, pleading tone, begging me to just make it right so everyone could calm down. Not a single message asked, "Leo, are you okay?" I was about to delete them all when a call came through from a number I recognized, but hadn't heard from in years. My Aunt Helen. She was my mother's older sister, a quiet, kind woman who had always been on the periphery of our family dramas. I decided to answer. "Leo?" Her voice was hesitant. "Honey, it's your Aunt Helen. Are you all right?" The simple question, the genuine concern in her voice, almost undid me. It was the first time anyone had asked. "I'm fine, Aunt Helen," I said, my own voice surprisingly steady. "Your mother is losing her mind," she said, and I could hear the chaos in the background. "She's telling everyone you've gone crazy, that you're trying to ruin them. But I saw her at the door last night, Leo. I saw her face." She paused. "What really happened?" So I told her. I told her everything. The years of financial support, the constant demands, the lies about the engagement party, the words on the doorstep. I spoke calmly, laying out the facts like I was presenting a case file. When I was done, there was a long silence on the other end. "I knew it," she finally whispered. "I knew it was bad, but I didn't know it was that bad. Patricia, she's told everyone a very different story for years. A story that makes you out to be the villain." She took a deep breath. "Can you meet us, Leo? Please? The whole family. You need to tell them what you just told me. They need to hear it from you." "I'm not setting foot in that house again," I said firmly. "No, not there. Somewhere neutral," she insisted. "Please, Leo. For me. This has to stop." I thought about it. An ambush? Maybe. But Aunt Helen sounded sincere, and a part of me knew she was right. This couldn't be fought with texts and blocked calls. It needed a final, public confrontation. "Fine," I said. "The conference room at the Holiday Inn off I-71. 1 hour." I booked the room. It was small, soulless, with a polished table and uncomfortable chairs. Perfect. I went to my car and retrieved a thin folder from my briefcase. Then I waited. They arrived together, a united front of indignation. My mother, Eleanor, marched in first, her face a thundercloud of fury. Ethan swaggered in behind her, looking like he was ready for a fight. My father, Richard, shuffled in last, his eyes fixed on the floor. Aunt Helen and her husband, Uncle Jim, followed them in, looking nervous. They sat opposite me. For a moment no one spoke. The air was thick with resentment. My mother broke the silence. "I don't know what kind of sick game you're playing, Leo, but it ends now. You turn everything back on. Today." Ethan chimed in, leaning forward. "Yeah, man. What's your problem? You're just jealous, aren't you? Jealous that I'm getting married, that I have a life, and you're just alone with your job." "This isn't a game," I said calmly, ignoring Ethan and opening the folder in front of me. "It's an audit." I slid a single piece of paper across the table. It was a spreadsheet. I had spent the early morning hours compiling it. It was a detailed, itemized list of every dollar I had sent them over the past 10 years. Tuition payments, down payment on their car, mortgage assistance, the infamous kitchen floor. Every line had a date, a purpose, and an amount. The total was at the bottom in bold. $87,342.19. My father gasped. Ethan's jaw went slack. My mother, however, just glanced at it and scoffed. "Don't be ridiculous. This is an exaggeration. Families help each other. It's what they do. You gave that to us. It was a gift. You can't just demand it back when you throw a tantrum. What's next? Are you going to send a lawyer after us for your part of the inheritance early?" The mention of a lawyer and inheritance, twisted into an accusation of greed, was the final spark. "A gift," I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. "A gift is given with gratitude, Mom. It isn't extracted under false pretenses." Was the $5,000 for a burst pipe a gift? Or was it seed money for an engagement party you lied about to keep me away? She flinched, and that's when Aunt Helen stood up. Her hands were trembling, but her voice was clear and strong. "Stop it, Patricia," she said. Everyone stared at her. Aunt Helen never raised her voice. "Just stop it." She turned to the rest of the family, her eyes landing on my stunned father and my defiant brother. "Do you want to know the story she's been telling us for years?" Aunt Helen asked, her voice ringing with newfound courage. "She told us Leo abandoned the family, that he went off to his fancy school and his big-shot job and never looked back. She told us he never called, never visited, and that he never, ever sent a dime home. She said you too," she pointed at my parents, "were struggling to make ends meet, and that you were paying for Ethan's entire college fund on your own, while your ungrateful older son wouldn't even answer your calls." She wasn't done. "Last year, she told us you had gotten into some kind of trouble in Boston. A gambling problem," she said. "That was the story. That's why you never had any money to spare for your poor family. She made you a villain, Leo, so she could be a martyr." The silence that followed was absolute, deafening. It was the sound of a carefully crafted universe imploding. "She told us you were too proud to ask anyone for help," Helen continued, her eyes now locked on my mother. "We had no idea. We praised you for your strength, while you were slandering your own son, the son who was keeping you afloat. Last night wasn't about an engagement party. It was about making sure Leo didn't show up and expose the lie you've been living for a decade." I looked at my mother. The anger was gone from her face, replaced by a pale, waxy terror. She had been unmasked. The truth was out. The power had shifted, irrevocably and completely. This was the moment that changed everything, when I finally took back control of my own life. Thank you for staying with me to this point. You are amazing. If you could, please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 down below, just so I know you've been on this journey with me. It doesn't just help more people find this story. It lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone else. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to continue sharing the rest of this journey. In the crushing silence of that conference room, my mother seemed to shrink. The formidable, controlling matriarch vanished, leaving a small, terrified woman in her place. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked at my father, then at Ethan, searching for an ally, a lifeline. She found none. Ethan stared at the spreadsheet, then at me, then at his mother. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a dawning, horrified understanding. He hadn't just been the golden child. He'd been a pawn in her elaborate deception. The life of ease he'd enjoyed, the college education, the car, it was all funded by the brother he'd been taught to disdain, a brother he'd been told had a gambling problem. The shame on his face was real, but it was my father who finally broke. He slumped in his chair, covering his face with his hands. His shoulders shook with silent sobs. After a long moment, he looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and filled with a shame so profound it was painful to watch. He looked directly at me, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. "He's right," he choked out, his voice thick and broken. "Everything Helen said, and everything on that paper, it's all true. I knew our finances were bad after I was laid off years ago, but I was too proud to admit it. It was easier to let you carry the burden. We took advantage of him. I let it happen." He turned his gaze to my mother. "I let you do it, Eleanor. I was a coward." The admission hung in the air, a confession decades in the making. He had finally spoken the truth. His silence had been broken. I felt a strange sense of pity for him, but the cold resolve inside me didn't waver. This wasn't about pity. It was about consequences. "The financial support is over," I said, my voice cutting through the emotional wreckage. "It's done." I watched their faces fall, the reality of my words sinking in. "I am willing," I continued slowly, choosing my words with care, "to discuss a path forward, but it will not be on the old terms. Any future relationship, financial or otherwise, will be conditional. It will be tied to genuine effort, to honesty, to family therapy where we address this dysfunction with a professional. Those are my terms. There is no negotiation." I stood up, my legs feeling steadier than they had all day. I gathered my papers, placing the spreadsheet back into the folder. "You have my number," I said to the room at large. "When you're ready to talk about building something real, you can call. Until then, consider me retired as the family bank." I walked out of the room without a backward glance. Aunt Helen caught up with me in the hallway. She put a hand on my arm, her eyes full of a sad wisdom. "I'm so sorry, Leo," she said. "I should have said something sooner." "You said it when it mattered," I replied, "and I meant it." We stood there for a moment, and she gave me the final piece of the puzzle, the one that didn't excuse my mother's actions but colored them in a new, tragic light. "You know," she said softly, "before she met your father, she was in pharmacy school. She was brilliant, top of her class. She was going to have this amazing career. Then she got pregnant with you. She had to drop out. I think a part of her has resented you for the life she lost ever since. It's not fair, and it's not your fault, but it's the only thing that makes any sense of her cruelty. The revelation didn't change my decision, but it changed my perspective. It wasn't just about money or favoritism. It was about a deep, festering wound in my mother's own life that she had turned outward, using me as the target for her bitterness. I suddenly saw her not as a monster, but as a deeply unhappy person who had created a toxic world to cope with her own failures. I drove away from the hotel, leaving them to sift through the rubble of the world they had built on lies. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, it felt like my own. Later that day, my father called. His voice was humbled. He told me the engagement party had been canceled. Jessica, Ethan's fiancée, and her parents had been in the hotel lobby and had overheard everything. Her father, a no-nonsense lawyer, had pulled her aside and advised her to end things immediately. The divorce of their plans was swift and final. My mother had locked herself in her room and wouldn't speak to anyone. He asked if I would turn the utilities back on just for a little while so they could figure things out. The old me would have caved instantly, but the new me had boundaries. I took a deep breath. "I will pay for the utilities for the next 30 days, Dad," I said, my voice firm but not unkind. "That gives you 1 month to find a new source of income. After that, the accounts are in your name. This is your chance to show me you're serious about changing." There was a pause, and then, for the first time, I heard a simple, unqualified response. "Okay, Leo," he said. "That's fair. Thank you." It was a start. A single, fragile step on a long, new road. The 6 months that followed were like waking up from a long, suffocating dream. The initial silence from my family was deafening, but it was a healing silence. It gave me space to breathe, to live my life without the constant weight of their needs on my shoulders. My work, which had always been a refuge, now became a source of genuine passion. Without the constant mental drain of my family's dramas, my focus sharpened. I took on a challenging new project, leading a team to turn around a failing company. I worked long hours, but it was for myself, for my career, for my future. My boss, Mr. Sterling, the firm's CEO, called me into his office one day. "Leo," he said, getting straight to the point in his typical fashion. He gestured to a chair. "I've been watching you the last few months. There's a new fire in your work, a confidence I haven't seen before. The board has seen your work on the acquisition. It's brilliant. We're offering you a promotion, senior consultant. It comes with a significant salary increase and more responsibility. You've earned it." The words, "you've earned it," hit me with surprising force. I had spent a lifetime earning things for other people. This was the first time I felt the full, undiluted satisfaction of my own achievement. "Thank you, sir," I said, my voice clear and steady. "I accept." The promotion wasn't just a title. It was a validation of my worth, completely independent of my family. The extra money didn't go towards a new roof or a brother's tuition. It went into my own retirement fund. It went towards a down payment on a condo of my own, in a neighborhood I loved. It went towards a trip to Italy I'd always dreamed of taking, where I ate pasta and drank wine and didn't check my phone for financial emergencies. My apartment, which once felt like a temporary station, began to feel like a home. I bought art that I loved. I learned to cook meals that weren't just for sustenance. I hosted dinner parties for my friends, filling the space with laughter and genuine connection. I reconnected with Chloe over video calls, and she cheered on every step of my newfound freedom. One of the most significant changes was in my relationships. I had always been hesitant to let people get too close, afraid they would see the mess of my family life and run. My ex-girlfriend Sarah's words about my financial marriage to my family had stung because they were true. Now there was no mess to hide. I started dating again, not with the desperation of filling a void, but with the quiet confidence of someone who was whole on their own. I met a woman, a landscape architect named Anna, who was kind and independent and funny. When I eventually told her my story, she didn't see me as damaged goods. She saw me as strong. I spent a weekend with Aunt Helen and Uncle Jim. They drove up to Boston to visit me. We walked the Freedom Trail, ate lobster rolls by the harbor, and talked for hours. They told me stories about my mother when she was young, full of ambition and fire. It helped me understand her, even if I couldn't forgive her yet. Being with them felt easy, normal. It was the family I had always wanted, one built on mutual respect and love, not obligation and guilt. I was finally investing in the most important asset I had, myself. Every day, I was building a life that was rich and full, a life where my value wasn't determined by how much I could give to others, but by the person I was becoming. The ghost of the boy who stood on that cold doorstep was fading, replaced by a man who was finally, truly, standing on his own 2 feet. While I was building my new life, the old one was being slowly, painfully dismantled and rebuilt. The updates came in sporadic, cautious communications. My father was the first to truly change. He got a job. It wasn't glamorous. He worked as a dispatcher for a local trucking company, mostly night shifts, but it was honest work. He called me about once a week. The conversations were awkward at first, stilted and full of unspoken words. He never asked for money, not once. Instead, he'd ask about my work, about my trip to Italy, about the condo I was looking at. He was trying, in his own fumbling way, to be a father, not a dependent. One day, he told me he had started seeing a therapist. "I spent 30 years being quiet," he said, his voice heavy with regret over the phone. I thought I was keeping the peace, but I was just letting the poison spread. I've got a lot to unpack. A lot I need to apologize for, Leo. Most of all to you. It was the bravest thing I had ever heard him say. Ethan's transformation was more dramatic. His engagement was officially off, and reality hit him like a ton of bricks. Without my funding, he had to drop out of his final semester of college. He got a job with a construction crew, hard manual labor that was a world away from the easy life he was used to. He sold his expensive sound system and gaming console to pay for the deposit on a small apartment. About 3 months after the confrontation, he left me a voicemail. It was clumsy and rambling. "Hey Leo, it's Ethan. Look, I've been a real piece of work, man. A real jerk. I believed it all, you know? It was easier to believe you were the bad guy than to admit I was a freeloader. What I said about you being jealous, that was stupid. I was the one who was jealous. You got out. You built something. I'm sorry. For everything." A week later, I received a notification from my bank, a transfer of $50. The sender was Ethan Mitchell. The memo line read simply, "Start." It was more than I ever expected. The golden child was finally growing up, learning the value of a dollar because he was finally earning it himself. My mother was the one who struggled the most. According to my dad and Aunt Helen, she refused to go to therapy. She couldn't admit the depth of her wrongdoing. The loss of control, the loss of her carefully constructed narrative, had shattered her. She had to get a part-time job as a cashier at a local pharmacy, a bitter echo of the career she had once dreamed of. My dad said she was quiet, withdrawn, a ghost in her own home. The anger had burned out, leaving only ashes. She never called me. Our only communication was through my father. He told me she asked about me sometimes, but her pride was a fortress too thick to breach. I felt a pang of sadness for her, for the unhappy woman trapped in a prison of her own making. Maybe one day she would find a way out, but I knew it was a journey she had to take on her own. I couldn't save her, and I was finally okay with that. The change wasn't a fairy tale. Our family wasn't magically healed. It was broken, and we were all just picking up the pieces, trying to see if we could build something new and stronger from the rubble. It was messy and slow and painful, but for the first time it was honest. And that was more than I'd ever had before. It's been over a year now since that night on the doorstep. My life is unrecognizable in the best possible way. I have my condo, my promotion, and my relationship with Anna is serious and wonderful. We're talking about a future together, one built on partnership, not dependency. My relationship with my dad and Ethan is a work in progress, built on a new foundation of honesty and effort. We're taking it one day at a time. My father is saving up to come visit me in Boston, paying his own way for the first time. Ethan sends me $50 every month, like clockwork. It's not about the money. It's about the principle. It's his way of showing respect. I haven't spoken to my mother yet, but I've left the door open. The anger has faded, leaving only a quiet sadness for what could have been, and a sliver of hope for what still might be. For years, I operated under the false belief that my self-worth was something I had to earn from my family. I thought love was transactional, that if I just deposited enough money, enough sacrifice, enough obedience into their accounts, I would eventually be able to make a withdrawal of acceptance and affection. I was trying to pay off an emotional debt that wasn't mine to begin with. But I learned the hard way that love shouldn't cost you your dignity. Family is supposed to be about mutual support, not one-way exploitation. I learned that setting a boundary isn't an act of cruelty. It's an act of self-preservation. It's teaching people how to treat you, and sometimes it means walking away from a dynamic that is designed to break you. It doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a person who wants to survive. I spent a decade trying to be the perfect son, the provider, the savior. But in the end, the only person I needed to save was myself. By closing the Bank of Leo, I finally gave myself the permission to invest in my own happiness, to build a future on my own terms. The man who knocked on that door a year ago was a boy, desperate for approval. The man I am today knows that the only approval that truly matters is the one you find when you look in the mirror. The greatest return on investment I ever made wasn't on the stock market. It was when I finally decided to bet on myself. The ledger is finally balanced. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you had to make a tough choice to protect your own well-being? I'd be honored to read your story in the comments below. And please, don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next.